Baghdad, 1998. A wedding celebration fills the air with music and laughter. The bride, barely 19, sits surrounded by family and friends. Then the music stops. Black Mercedes sedans pull up outside. Armed men step out. Within minutes, she's gone. Her new husband stands frozen, helpless. Her father knows better than to call the police, because the man who just took his daughter isn't a criminal. He's the president's son. And in Saddam Hussein's Iraq, Uday Hussein didn't need permission. He didn't face consequences. For 2 decades, he built a system designed for one purpose: to hunt, capture, and destroy the lives of Iraq's young women. What he did to them still haunts the survivors today. June 18, 1964. Uday Saddam Hussein was born into one of the most dangerous families in the Middle East. From the moment he could walk, he learned a simple truth: power means never hearing the word no. His childhood was different from other Iraqi boys. While they played soccer in dusty streets, Uday attended Baghdad College High School, reserved for the sons of generals and ministers. His father, Saddam Hussein, was climbing toward absolute control, and Uday was watching. Former classmates remember him clearly: arrogant, violent, cruel to anyone he saw as beneath him. He yelled at teachers, started fights over nothing, humiliated other students just because he could. But the real warning signs appeared when he turned 13. That's when the weapons came out. Pistols first, then rifles. He practiced constantly, shooting at targets in private compounds. Sometimes the targets were animals. Guards assigned to watch him reported something disturbing. He enjoyed it. Not just the shooting, the killing. By 1979, everything changed. Saddam Hussein seized full control of Iraq. At 15 years old, Uday wasn't just the president's son anymore. He was untouchable. He started appearing at political meetings, sitting in on interrogations, watching how his father's security forces operated, how they made people disappear, how they silenced families, how nobody ever asked questions. Iraqi officials were given clear instructions: treat Uday like a future leader, show him respect, give him access, never refuse him anything. And that's exactly what they did. While other teenage boys worried about school and girls, Uday was learning how to wield power without limits. He watched his father rule through fear. He saw how easily people could be controlled, how quickly resistance could be crushed. And he was taking notes. By 1982, Uday was 18 years old. He had wealth, he had protection, he had armed men who answered only to him. Now he needed victims. 1982. Iraq was at war with Iran. Young men were dying by the thousands at the front lines. Cities were being bombed. Families were burying their sons. But Uday Hussein wasn't thinking about war. He was building something else. A network. One designed to find, track, and deliver exactly what he wanted: young women. The system was simple, terrifyingly simple. Mukhabarat agents, Iraq's secret intelligence officers, began receiving new assignments. They were told to identify attractive girls between 15 and 19 years old. Students, daughters of teachers, shopkeepers, civil servants, girls from families with no political power to fight back. Once identified, the approach was always the same. Government officials would arrive at the family's home, dressed in suits, carrying official papers. They'd congratulate the parents. Their daughter had been selected for a national youth program, or an award ceremony, or special recognition from the presidential office. Most families were honored. In Saddam's Iraq, connections to power meant survival. Parents believed their daughters were being given opportunities. They had no idea what was really happening. The girls were picked up in government vehicles, told to dress nicely, promised they'd be home by evening. Instead, they were driven to one of Uday's private estates, heavily guarded compounds in Baghdad's wealthiest neighborhoods: Mansour, Karada, Qadisiyah. Inside, there were no ceremonies, no awards, no way out. And what happened in those villas stayed hidden for years. But the pattern was clear. Girls who went in came back different, if they came back at all. Uday didn't bother hiding his identity. He didn't need to. The girls knew exactly who he was. And they knew what that meant. Nobody would help them. Nobody could. Former security drivers who later fled Iraq described what they'd seen. Filing cabinets in Uday's personal offices, full of folders. Each one contained a girl's photo, school records, home address, and family phone numbers. Everything catalogued. Everything organized. This wasn't random violence. It was systematic hunting. August 1984. A second-year law student at Baghdad University received an invitation. Official government letterhead. A ceremony honoring top students. Her father, proud and hopeful. I watched her leave that morning in a black sedan. She never came home. When he went to the university, they had no record of any ceremony. When he went to the police, they told him to stop asking questions. When he kept pushing, security officers showed up at his workplace. He was fired 3 days later. His daughter's name was added to a list that kept growing, week after week, month after month, and nobody could stop it. Because in Iraq, Uday Hussein wasn't just protected by his father's power, he was being given more of his own. 1985. Uday Hussein was 21 years old, and Saddam just handed him an entire institution, the Iraqi Olympic Committee. On paper, it was about promoting sports and national pride. In reality, it gave Uday control over thousands of young athletes across the country. Swimmers, gymnasts, and tennis players, runners, most of them were teenage girls. Within months, he began reshaping the Olympic headquarters in Baghdad. New surveillance cameras appeared in hallways. Private office wings were built with tinted windows and hidden exits. Rooms that weren't on any official floor plan. Female athletes started receiving strange invitations. Private evaluations, performance reviews. Coaches were told these meetings were mandatory. Mandatory and confidential. The sessions took place behind locked doors, sometimes in Uday's office, sometimes in hotel rooms where national teams were staying. Girls as young as 15 were called in alone. When they came out, they didn't speak. Coaches knew better than to ask questions. By 1986, families across Iraq were quietly pulling their daughters out of sports programs, and they'd cite health problems or school pressure. But the real reason spread through whispers. Mothers warning other mothers, fathers making silent calculations about their daughters' safety. Iraq's national teams began losing talent, not because the girls weren't good enough, because their parents were terrified. But Uday's reach didn't stop at sports. 1987. He expanded into Iraqi state media. Television presenters became his next targets. Young women in their early 20s. Beautiful, talented, visible. Several disappeared without explanation. One was a popular presenter on Baghdad's Channel 9. She arrived at the Ministry of Information for a scheduled taping one afternoon. Security footage showed her walking through the main entrance. She was never seen leaving, as official records listed her as resigned. Her family received no body, no explanation, just a warning to stop asking questions. French and Jordanian diplomats stationed in Baghdad began filing reports. They'd noticed a pattern. Female TV personalities were vanishing. The Iraqi government's explanation was always the same. Personal reasons, family matters, relocation. None of it was true. Behind the scenes, Uday was expanding his network of properties. 4 heavily fortified villas in Baghdad alone. Another compound outside Mosul. Each one had reinforced gates, armed guards, and soundproofed rooms. Former staff who later escaped described them as silent zones, thick concrete walls, no windows facing the street. Once the doors closed, no sound escaped. Some of these buildings had basements, on underground chambers that didn't appear on construction permits, rooms with bolted furniture and medical equipment. Doctors working in government hospitals started receiving midnight calls. Military vehicles would arrive with injured women, broken bones, internal bleeding, bruised faces. The doctors were told to treat them, not to ask names, not to file reports, not to remember anything. Those who hesitated lost their medical licenses. Those who refused disappeared. By 1988, Uday had perfected his system. He had properties, he had staff, he had complete protection. But that October, he proved he was capable of something even worse. Something he'd do in front of witnesses. October 1988. A private party in one of Baghdad's most exclusive venues. Military commanders in dress uniforms. Foreign diplomats sipping imported whiskey. Al-Ba'ath party officials discussing oil deals. And Uday Hussein, drunk and furious. The target was Kamal Hana Gegeo, Saddam's personal food taster and valet. A man who'd served the Hussein family for years. Someone who had access to the president every single day. Uday blamed him for something unforgivable. Kamal had introduced Saddam to his second wife, Samira Shabandar. Uday saw this as a betrayal of his mother, a threat to his own position in the family. And tonight, in front of Iraq's most powerful men, he decided to make Kamal pay. Without warning, Uday grabbed a gold-handled cane. He swung it at Kamal's head. Once, twice, again and again. The room went silent. Guests froze. Bodyguards stood motionless. Nobody moved to stop him. Kamal collapsed on the marble floor. Blood pooled around his body. He died, right there. Sit in front of dozens of witnesses. Uday dropped the cane and walked out. Within hours, news spread through Baghdad's diplomatic quarter. Foreign embassies filed reports. Witnesses gave accounts. Everyone knew what happened, and absolutely nothing was done. Saddam was reportedly furious, not because his son had committed murder, but because he'd done it so publicly, so recklessly. Uday was sent to Switzerland. A brief exile, a slap on the wrist. He returned months later. No trial, no prison, no consequences. The message to Iraq was clear. Uday Hussein could kill anyone, anywhere, and walk away. But what didn't make headlines was how that same brutality was being used against women behind closed doors. Around the same time, a 17-year-old girl tried to report Uday for assault. She went to a local police station in Baghdad. He gave her statement to an officer, asked for protection. The report never went anywhere. Hours later, military intelligence agents arrived at the station. They took the girl into custody. Her father, a schoolteacher, rushed to find her. He was warned once. Stay silent. He didn't listen. He kept asking questions, kept demanding answers. 3 days later, armed men moved into his family's home. The family was never heard from again. Neighbors reported seeing the house emptied, furniture removed, windows boarded up. Official records showed nothing. No arrests, no investigations, no trace. By the end of 1988, Uday had proven something terrifying. He could beat a man to death in public and face no punishment, which meant what he did in private, where there were no witnesses, no cameras, no foreign diplomats, could be far, far worse. And it was about to get worse, because in 1990, Iraq went to war, and war creates chaos. Chaos creates cover. August 1990. Iraqi tanks rolled into Kuwait. Within days, the world responded. Coalition forces mobilized. Sanctions tightened. Bombs began falling on Baghdad. Iraq was collapsing into chaos. Food shortages, power outages, families fleeing their homes. And Uday Hussein saw opportunity. With the country distracted by war, his operations intensified. The blacked-out Mercedes sedans appeared more frequently, outside schools, near parks, at bus stops. The targets were the same, girls between 14 and 17, sometimes still in school uniforms when they were taken. The methods became faster, more aggressive. Security teams no longer bothered with fake ceremonies or elaborate cover stories. And they simply took who they wanted. If families asked questions, they were silenced immediately. In some cases, fathers who tried to resist were arrested on fabricated charges. Mothers who went to police stations were turned away at gunpoint. Remote towns became hunting grounds. Bakba, Hilla, Samawa, places where families had no political connections, no way to fight back. By 1991, intelligence sources inside the presidential palace revealed something chilling. Uday had created a specialized unit, a small team of trusted officers whose only job was identifying and transporting young women. They operated under government cover, used official vehicles, carried forged documents, and they kept records. Lists of names, photos, family addresses, all stored on secure servers with backup copies hidden in safe houses guarded by Republican Guard units. Former staff who later defected called it the disappearance list, a monthly log of women who'd been taken. Most names were never crossed off. But Uday's boldest move came in the late 1990s. He started targeting weddings. 1998, Karbala, a wedding celebration in full swing, music playing, guests dancing. The bride, 19 years old, surrounded by family. Then Uday arrived, unannounced, uninvited. Dozens of armed bodyguards, luxury vehicles blocking the street. The music stopped instantly. He walked through the crowd, eyes scanning. When he spotted the bride, he gave an order. She was escorted out. Her new husband stood frozen. Guests stayed in their seats, too terrified to move. Hours later, her body was found on the outskirts of the city. Signs of severe physical trauma, clear evidence of torture. Her father demanded an investigation. He was arrested the next day. He never came home. Across Iraq, families began changing how they celebrated. Weddings became smaller, private. Some stopped holding them altogether. Schools quietly shut down honors programs. Any event that might draw attention to young girls became too dangerous. But the worst discovery came after 2003, when American forces entered Iraq. Hidden compounds near Baghdad International Airport, secret detention facilities outside Mosul, buildings that didn't exist on any official map. Inside, investigators found something that still haunts them: women's cells. Dozens of them, soundproofed, bolted doors, surveillance cameras in every corner. And scratched into the concrete walls, names, dates, desperate messages. Some had been there for months, others for years. No trials, no records, no way out. These weren't prisoners of war. They weren't political dissidents. They were just girls. Girls who'd caught Uday's attention. But Uday's reign of terror was about to face its first real threat. Not from Iraqi courts, not from his father, from something he couldn't control. December 12, 1996, Mansour District, Baghdad. Late evening, Uday Hussein's armored vehicle moved through the upscale neighborhood. Bodyguards in chase cars, the usual convoy. Then gunfire erupted. Another vehicle pulled alongside. Armed men opened fire at point-blank range. Bullets tore through the door panels. 7 rounds hit Uday, chest, legs, lower back. His driver floored the accelerator, and the convoy rushed him to Ibn Sina Hospital. Surgeons worked through the night. Against all odds, he survived. But the damage was permanent. The bullets had shattered his spine. He lost feeling in parts of his left leg. For months, he couldn't walk. A wheelchair became his reality. Even after recovery, he needed a cane for the rest of his life. The assassination attempt was reportedly carried out by members of an Iraqi tribal group. Saddam's security forces responded brutally. Dozens arrested. Public executions followed. But something had changed. Uday was no longer untouchable. Someone had gotten close enough to nearly kill him. The illusion of invincibility was broken. His physical disabilities forced him to delegate. The hands-on violence he once carried out personally now happened through his guards and security teams. But the operations didn't stop. They couldn't, because by now, this was about more than power or pleasure. It was about control, about proving he still ruled through fear. Then came 2002. International pressure mounted on Iraq. The United States accused Saddam of hiding weapons of mass destruction. UN inspectors returned. Sanctions tightened further. War was coming. Everyone knew it. By March 2003, American and coalition forces launched their invasion. Airstrikes lit up Baghdad's night sky. Government buildings crumbled. Power grids failed. Saddam's regime began to collapse. But even as Baghdad burned, witnesses reported seeing Uday, still moving between safe houses, still surrounded by armed escorts, still refusing to run. April 2003. American troops entered Baghdad. Saddam's statue fell in Firdos Square. When the Ba'ath Party scattered, Uday fled north, For months, he moved between safe houses in Kirkuk, Tikrit, and finally Mosul. Loyal tribesmen hid him. Former officers provided protection, but American intelligence was closing in. July 2003, a tip came in. Specific location: Al-Fala neighborhood in Mosul, a fortified villa. Inside were Uday, his brother Qusay, Qusay's 14-year-old son Mustafa, and several bodyguards. Task Force 20, elite U.S. Special Forces, surrounded the building. They called for surrender. The response was immediate gunfire. What followed was a 4-hour firefight. Rockets, grenades, heavy weapons. When the smoke cleared, everyone inside was dead. Uday's body was badly damaged, but dental records and old medical x-rays confirmed his identity. Photos of the bodies were released to the Iraqi public, a proof that the nightmare was finally over. Across Iraq, crowds gathered around television screens, staring at the photos. Some cried, others stood in silence. For 2 decades, families had lived in fear. Mothers had hidden their daughters. Fathers had pulled girls from schools. Weddings had become dangerous. Public life had meant constant risk. Now it was over. But the victims never got their justice. Most never got to tell their stories. The detention centers were emptied and demolished. The files were destroyed or lost. The names scratched into prison walls were painted over. Hundreds of women simply vanished from record. No graves, no memorials, no acknowledgement. And in the chaos of post-invasion Iraq, their cases were never investigated. Uday Hussein died in a firefight, but the women he destroyed, most of their families are still waiting for answers.